Flatmatters.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Flatmattersonline Pete Brandt interview. As many of you may know, Pete kindly organised a GoFundMe page to get me out to San Francisco and the One Love Jam. I can't really thank Pete and everyone who donated enough. A dream trip for me. One of the number one things on my mind during the trip was to interview my childhood hero and ask him all the questions that I couldn't find anywhere else really. So grab a cuppa. The interview's a little bit on the long side, but it needs to be. This guy deserves the respect and he gets it right here. Tune in and find out all things Pete Brandt. Let's do it.
So talk a little bit about growing up in San Francisco and the culture, where you rode, that kind of thing. So talk about San Mateo and everything.
Yeah, pretty much born and raised Bay Area. San Francisco, many years riding in Embarcardero, but primarily I rode at the 5th Street Underground in San Mateo, which is a really cool spot because at the time there wasn't too many cars, so I was able to ride in a secluded spot and not really be distracted too much. As far as the Golden Gate Park scene, that was something that I didn't have a car when I first started going up there, so I would ride with another dude that's from Redwood City, so we would ride approximately 32 miles there and back to be able to session, and luckily when I got a car I was able to go a lot easier and spend more time actually just riding as opposed to commuting. So yeah, pretty much the scene now is the Clocktower, and it's growing. It has its moments where, you know, not too many people are out there and I'll be out there by myself, but I also like to hang with the skaters and stuff like that too. So, you know, that's pretty much my scene here.
Okay, talk about being streetwise.
Streetwise in what way?
I would say you're quite a streetwise guy. You know what's going on with your area and how to look after yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's
in an area such as San Francisco, you mean? Like I mean.
Yeah, the streets really teach you to be responsible and resourceful. It's kind of one of those things that if you're going to a spot, you have to not only maintain the spot, you know, clean up the glass and just, you know, basically just keep it up, you know, especially for me, it's very important for me to take care of my spot because I don't want to have anybody give me a reason like, you know, look at these guys are trashing the spot. So I cleaned it up almost as if it was my own home.
Talk about growing up in the competing in the AFA days, ABA, whatever.
You're nicked. Yeah, basically the AFA days, it's interesting because I always wanted to go to the bigger contests like the Masters Series and stuff like that, and I didn't really have a lot of support, honestly, growing up, as far as, you know, parents being supportive and that type of thing, so it was kind of on my own. So I went to a lot of the local contest, you know, which is basically a lot of the same riders from LA, so I would travel down there 2 times a month, basically every other weekend, and it was like a ton of contests that I went to, because I would literally do it 2 times a month, so it's like added up over 2 years, and you know, you can do the math, it's quite a few contests, so that really kept me prepped for when I did end up traveling and going different places and stuff like that. I had the experience of competing, you know, and just being able to shake the nerves off and just get down to it.
When did you first start riding?
Oh, I've always ridden. That's what's interesting. I was kind of brought into BMX. Not kind of, I really was brought into BMX. It's one of those things that I grew up on a street in San Mateo where all the kids were older than me. I was actually the youngest. I was about 4.5, and these kids were jumping, and it was like, you know, BMX in the very beginning, it wasn't like, you know, oh, I got into Flatland or I got into transition or riding park. There was none of that. There was basically a bike and whatever you were down to ride and what you could find to ride. So I just kind of from then on, you know, it's interesting because when I first caught my first glimpse of Flatland, it was something that I just instantly was just drawn to, where I was like, knew like that's what I'm going to do all day, you know, pretty much for the rest of my life. At least, you know, as a kid, you don't have that plan necessarily to work, but you just know that, hey, I could do this forever. You know, that was really my true honest feeling of it.
Tell me about the ozone era. It's one of my favorite eras growing up.
You're nicked. Oh yeah, the ozone era. Well, it was interesting. It was a good experience, and it also became kind of a little bit of a bad, disappointing experience, honestly. It was good to, like originally I didn't even really want to ride for a company. I didn't want to do shows. I just didn't think I was good enough. I kind of didn't want to, have the feeling of failing. I just wanted to ride my bike and the freedom of that. But it started, kind of informing me to what I do today, even show-wise and contests and stuff like that. So it introduced me to a bunch of different platforms of BMX and Flatland. And it just, it was really cool, like actually, getting some support, because again, I didn't have support from my parents and stuff like that. They were divorced, and it was like, no sob story, but it was one of those things where I was kind of on my own. So like really, the people that I looked up to were guys like Dave Vandersbeck and just people, that I was riding and hanging with, and I was fortunate enough that they took me under their wing. So it was, one of those things. So Ozone kind of played part of that too, because it was like I was part of a BMX family. It was like just knowing all these guys, and it's interesting because I still keep in contact with a lot of those guys that were on Ozone back in the day, and I helped a lot of people out too. Being in that position, I was like, hey, Eric Emerson sponsored this guy. This guy's awesome, and there's just quite a few people that I just, I was down with, and I respected their riding. So it's kind of like I was, just kind of shaking hand, making the company shake hands with other riders, of interest and stuff like that.
So you mentioned Eric Emerson, the dreaded question. Growing up with Eric Emerson, you two definitely had an image growing up for me, like a gangster rap type of image. Do you want to talk a little bit about just like riding with Eric Emerson, and perhaps a good Eric Emerson story that's PG?
It was interesting because he was a little bit younger than me, so as far as in the master and expert class, he was competing in a different class, but it was really one of those things where we pushed each other quite a bit. It was like, he was always nipping at my heels because he was the other guy that was around here, so it was like, I'd say friendly competition, but it was definitely one of those things that, we really pushed each other because, a lot of times, I was on the other side of the bay, so we wouldn't see each other for a week. So it's like, oh, I got a week to come with it. I have a week to basically prepare and have the new stuff and drop it on them. There's all kinds of stories like, the hitchhiker story where, basically I told him in a car ride over on the way to Ozone one time that I was like, hey, I heard of Kevin Jones doing it, didn't ever see it, didn't see any pictures. I just, I heard that that's how the position is, like you stand with both feet on the pegs and basically you're underneath the bike. And I made it a mission to learn it because I was like, oh man, that just is going to open up doors, and that's a time when a lot of scuffing was being phased out. We were kind of just rolling with the precision of the bike. And yeah, it was just interesting because, this is a perfect example. Once we finally got to Ozone, Eric got to see me do it, and he was like taunting me before, like, oh, there's no way that you could do this. And I did it first try because I was fired up, and I was like pretty emotional, like, I'll show these guys. And it was Carly Garcia was there too, and I just rolled it. I rolled it super far, and it was probably the longest one I ever rolled at that time. And I just remember turning around, and all of a sudden Eric was on it. He's like, dude, I'm going to learn this right now. Basically just started firing it out, started getting into it. That's the kind of motivation it was for both of us. It was vice versa. I would see him do something, I'd be like, oh man, I gotta do that. I could use this to that, and we would just like make it interchangeable with what we're doing, not exact styles, but definitely, we would take certain tricks where, we would see each other and just feed off of it and create.
That's amazing. Using high pegs. Talk about it.
I don't know what we're thinking. It really was one of those things that just kind of was, the thing at the time. And it was interesting because there was the folding fork flappers is what we call it. Props to Sean McKinney on that one, coming up with the name. But basically there was like these folding fork stands and stuff like that. So we wanted something stable. We didn't want to use those. So the next thing was basically, the pegs were actually in the forks and peg bosses, and what would happen is it was kind of like a happy medium. It wasn't up at the top like where the Haros folded out, but at the same time it wasn't all the way at the bottom. And we were able to do whiplashes and stuff like that. I felt comfortable with it, and later on it of course evolved into just centered to the axle because it makes sense, especially for today's riding. It'd be probably pretty difficult to bust out on those Peg Boss is way up there, but you know, there's definitely just like a leverage type of a thing. You know, I was able to do crack packers, hitchhikers, all that stuff with it. It's just a little bit different of a balance point.
You got a lot of coverage in freestyling. The biggest magazine in BMX history, I would say. Talk a little bit about what you mentioned about working with Spike and some good stories there.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, it was interesting because there's years that went by that I was writing and I never got in a magazine, and you know, it'd be interesting because I would have somebody, you know, photographers would be taking pictures, so you know, it's like one of those things where I'm like, you know, just crossing my fingers, you know. It's not like the internet. It would take like, you know, it would take sometimes months before, you know, a picture would develop in the magazine, or you would think that, you know, is it going to be the next one, is it going to be the next one, all of a sudden, guess what, nothing happens, and that's what happened in the beginning. You know, it got to a point where I was just like, I wrote it off, honestly. I was like, man, these guys are either hating on me or they're just not down or whatever. It's just not, maybe not my luck or something like that. And then one day I was talking to Mike Kernich, one of the NorCal writers, and he brought it up. He's like, hey man, did you see that 2-page spread that you got? Or he said something to the effect that, you know, like, hey, that, you know, 2-page spread is rad, something like that. And I thought he was messing with me. I thought he was like kind of just, because he was that kind of character back then. And I was just like, yeah, whatever, man, you know. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden somebody came up and showed it to me, and I was just devastated because, I mean, instead of getting a little small black and white corner picture in Plus or something like that, it was like the full, like right in the middle of the magazine, you know, and it just, you know, the spread out and everything like that is a full 2 pages. So it was amazing. It was like actually a feeling of accomplishment, and definitely wasn't an egotistical thing. Like, oh man, I just want to look at myself in the magazine. It was like I finally was accepted, or you know, to where somebody, you know, appreciated my art and what I was doing.
Bike modifications from an early age.
Yeah,
Talk about what you brought to Flatland, because I think you were like inspirational in modern day Flatland. You really kicked on a lot of things that progressed how you can use a crappy bike that was, to be honest, bikes were crap back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And you made things a lot better, and influenced hell of a lot of people with what you did. So what are some of the things you came up with?
Some of the things I came up with, like for an example, the plastic pedals, that was like a big thing. And that was like not something like, oh man, I'm going to make plastic pedals and everybody's going to have them. You know, it wasn't that. It was like really one of those things that I was thinking of for my particular style and writing. And at the time I was jumping my mom's exercise machine. She had one that was on a stand, and basically you could pedal it, and I was like doing no-footed cans and hopping this thing, and it's hilarious. I would like, you know, get pretty good distance and almost hit my head on the ceiling and stuff. And my mom, you know, one time she actually caught me. She like flipped out and was like, "Oh my God, that's what the hell!" You know, it's like an earthquake happening, you know, in the apartment that we lived at. So, but then I started thinking about it, and at the time I actually rode a freewheel with really small one-piece cranks. So I was able to, you know, this exercise bike also had one-piece cranks. So I was like, man, those pedals they're awesome. And then on top of it, for, you know, coasting caboose, I was like, yeah, it's probably gonna be a lot easier on the shins than like a Shimano DX. So I ended up just taking them off and putting it on there. And of course, it's kind of like the same thing as what happens with street riders, where they would, why do you got such a small sprocket? You know, and it was like, that was the thing, is, you know, what they would say is not plastic pedals, but they go, why do you have little kids bike pedals on, you know, on your cranks? And it was, you know, full on just one of those things that I never dreamed of, you know, much like the free coaster and stuff like that. It wasn't like, you know, I thought that people were going to be doing it for years to come, or it was going to, you know, develop into something. It was just something, a personal, like, you know, a personal choice for me, you know, to what I thought was good for my writing. But there's other stuff too that, you know, we came up with. I was making free coasters. Actually, how that started is, again, I was riding a freewheel, and I didn't want to ride a coaster brake because I hated jumping with it, for one. For two, I really didn't like the fact that it was so weighty and it just dragged, because you have constant friction always because the brake shoes that are in there are rubbing the shell. So what I ended up doing is, I just thought one day, I'm like, man, you know, my brother actually had a Skyway mag, and it was considered a conversion kit, which they didn't have the screw-on cog where you could put a freewheel on a mag at the time. That's how old I am. Interesting. But what ended up happening is, to make a Skyway mag, a freewheel, you had this thing, and it was called like an unbrake, and basically I adapted that, started making plastic washers and drilling a hole in, like, you know, soda bottle caps, and basically filed it down. This is way back in the day before you could go to Home Depot and get, like, you know, a plastic washer. a certain size. So we were just like modding that out in, my metal shop class, and I just developed, I tried, and what was even more amazing is that I tried it and I had no idea. I thought like, just how the mechanics are, in my mind at that time, because I was really young, I was like, kind of like, I don't even know if this is going to work, And so, because it was just really for people that wanted to jump with the freewheel, basically feeling on a bag. So I started making those, and it just kind of caught on, and everybody started asking me to make them and stuff, and then a few other people started modding out different things, but that's basically where it came from, with the Bendix coaster brake, little conversion kit, and then basically I just kind of copied the idea and modified it to make it to where you could actually adjust the play and stuff like that.
That's brilliant. Reality TV, one of the most inspirational video sections of all time for me and a lot of other people. You're nicked.
You're nicked!
Tell me about working with Chad Johnson and what that did for your career, and also where that was filmed. Give me as much background on that video as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting because Chad was, we would ride with him at a lot of the local contests and stuff like that, and we were familiar with them, and this is the very beginning. I believe, I want to say it's his first video. I think it is, as far as what he really put out. He might have recorded stuff before, but I think that was his first edited video. Of course, on a VHS. Camcorders were huge. It's a different world. But what was interesting about it is, like, much like a lot of videos back then, people would record and have all this footage, and then they wouldn't do anything with it because it was complicated to be able to edit and stuff like that, with the equipment that we had back then. But what's even more crazy about it is I never was like, oh man, this is going to launch my career. I never even considered writing a career. I just considered it something that I just love and live to do, just like much like today. And I just ended up filming with him one time, and he said he's coming up. He drove up there and he filmed Eric and me in a parking lot across from a Taco Bell, and it was in the most grimiest. It was like people like crackheads were running around. It was a good experience in the sense, even though most parents would be like, man, I can't believe my kid was out there or whatever doing, but it was good because I got to see what drugs will do to you at a young age, and I was like, hell no, I'm never doing any of that, because these guys were out of their minds, So we rode in a really grungy type of a spot, but it was like kind of one of those things where, we would ride here, right there, wherever we could until somebody wouldn't kick us out, and then we would stay there as long as we could. And that happened to be one of those spots, and the downfall of it is it was very like, we had people that were driving around like shooting, and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It was like in the heat of Hayward, and Hayward's kind of much like Oakland. There's a lot of like people claiming, streets, sets, neighborhoods, whatever, and it's just, in the heart of all of that. So, we just basically just stuck to ourselves and just rode there and just didn't get scared off. And so that's where Chad ended up recording it at the time, because that's where we rode once again. And then there's also the 5th Street Underground where we would go at nighttime. So I vaguely remember, riding during the day. I think we shot the Taco Bell parking lot first, which is the daytime, of course, and then at nighttime we went to the underground and got some more footage. And then amazingly, Chad all of a sudden came out with this video, and he put his own twist to it. Like, if any of the stuff that you see there was all him. It wasn't us going, yeah, that would be cool to have the streets of San Francisco and have this and that. He just used his own creative, style to basically create this amazing video. And I would have dreamed that people would watch it in the future. It's interesting because at the time we just thought like, our 15 seconds of fame kind of thing. That's it. It's gone, and like people will never see this in the future. And it's like it's interesting that it's considered a classic, and I was really honored to be part of that. And and it just really was amazing, because that was the whole kickoff to Chad creating videos.
Right into Tim Dog.
Oh, I just love Tim Dog. I like the aggressiveness of it, and at the time it was interesting because first it's riding the NWA and stuff like that, and then it's like the local contest is like, this guy's riding to fuck the police, and it just caused like a lot of drama. So I was like, okay, I guess I can't ride to that. They said no NWA, but they didn't say no Tim Dog. So of course, Fuck Compton was the next fucking, song pardon my language, but this is actually these are real tracks you can look up, and so I started riding a Tim Dog, and all of a sudden they were telling me I can't ride the Tim Dog, and then I was like just kind of experimented, and just I always rode to like kind of hypnotical gangster rap. I liked the aggressive like kind of power behind it, so it kind of was at the time like something that got me amped. Once that kicked on, it's like I was like ready to go. I was like fired up, kind of like what drum and bass does to me today.
Filming for 665 and a half. Talk about that, and the reference at the end to Dead Homies.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things, as far as the reference at the end, just get into that first, that was from an Ice Cube track, and I just thought it was like kind of funny, just at the time that was like new. It was something that, just came out, and so I was like, oh yeah, we should put it at the end, and it was like kind of joking around, but then Els really did it, and people thought I was dead, and then it was like, it was funny too, because and some people might not think it was funny, but I do, I don't know, like, it just really kind of fit that time, it was like, it wasn't, like nowadays if you try to fake something like that, of course somebody's going to go, dude, I just saw him on Instagram, on, his live feed or whatever, like there's ways, but back then it was all word of mouth, so it was like something that spread out, and then all of a sudden I would show up to a spot and they'd be like, dude, I thought you were dead, they took it really serious, in that sense, but, I don't think anybody called me up to ask me when my funeral was, ironically, so, yeah, I just kind of, that was definitely where the Dead Homies came from. It's kind of more of a joke and stuff like that, and yeah, it just carried on for a few years, and then people started to realize, like, he's not dead, he's like riding over on the other side of the parking lot.
So growing up, who would you consider your childhood motivations and inspirations, Flatland wise?
Oh, there's so many. That was the thing, is that as a kid, I just loved so many riders, because everybody had something to put into it, but I'd say my most, the guys that influenced me the most, I would say Dave Vanderspeck was one of them, because when I was a kid, I would skate and I would ride at the time, and it's funny because a lot of the skaters were like, dude, he rides BMX too, so, they wouldn't hang out with me. They thought I wasn't a real skater, even though I would smoke them, and I had the highest marks on wall rides and stuff like that. And actually there's like even footage from a Curb Dogs video where I'm skating in a contest, and that's where I'm getting with it, is that Dave Vanderspeck and there's a few other riders and stuff, they would do both. They would ride skateboards and they would do both, in a session. And so I was like, kind of like accepted with these guys. They took me under the wing, and then on top of that, it was just one of those things where I was like, oh, who says you can't do both? These guys are doing it, they're killing it. They're way better than any of these other guys that were judgmental towards me, so I gravitated towards that. And then slowly but surely, I stopped skating as much, because I was like strictly flatland, and it was like I wanted to devote all my time. I'd like literally like just, allocate like 10 minutes if I have to, I'd use that time to ride flatland. So it was like, that was like what I've been passionate about, and I was like that. I wanted to put all my time into that. So skating was always a fun thing as a kid, but it just ended up developing into strictly flatland, and just like really just living and loving it.
Growing up, how much time did you put into flatland riding?
Man, growing up, every minute I could, every second that I could possibly do it. It's interesting too, because I had a mom that wasn't very supportive of it. Not trying to, be negative or anything like that, but the reality of it was, it was frowned down upon. It was like, what are you going to do when you're 16 years old, and oh, you're wasting your time and all that type of stuff. And it's interesting because yeah, it was, there was times where it'd be like, Thanksgiving, you have school off, and my mom would be like, oh, you don't have to ride your bike today, it's a holiday. And I'm like, no, that's exactly the opposite of what I'm going to do. I'm going to ride my bike all day. Because I wasn't allowed, of course, to take school off to ride, so I just utilized every minute that I could. And it was interesting too, because I really wanted to spend as much time outside. It's unlike a lot of kids these days, that stay and play video games and stuff like that. I was like never inside. I was like always out, and I had multiple spots where I would ride. Where if it was raining or whatever, I had no excuse not to.
What about the period after Ozone, and kind of like when Go magazine came out, you kind of disappeared?
Yeah, it was mainly due to injuries. Like I had a bad injury with my hand, and luckily it didn't affect me, in the long run. But at the time, it was like kind of, everything just came crashing down at once. Ozone disappeared. They just shut the doors, didn't even tell us. We were just basically like, they just took off. We didn't know what was going on. We even went to the warehouse and we realized that it was gutted, it was empty. You know, and that's when we just realized like, well, that's the end of that. And the thing that was just, you know, just crazy about that is just, I ended up having to try to figure things out. Like for the first time in my life, I had to figure out how to be responsible. I had to, you know, like, cause I went on tour with Ozone for like 2 years basically. You know, it just took off right from high school. I just like, I was out, I was like, man, you know, here's my opportunity, it's right there. And at the time I didn't really have stable living conditions and stuff like that. I was like basically floating around, and I was like, man, if I could go out and, you know, just do shows with these guys, you know, stay in a hotel room, it's cool. And then it just kept, you know, it's like this snowball effect where we kept doing like Raging Waters water park and stuff like that, these shows that just kept coming in, so I just kept rolling with it, and that's what I did. And then all of a sudden it was like basically like the rug was pulled out from underneath me, and I had, you know, no inkling of what to do, and there was no support, there was no like, you know, I wasn't making money, you know, doing anything, you know, with BMX or whatever, so I had to get a job. And one of the things that I always say, you know, a lot of my relatives actually would, and just people that knew me were like, oh, all you can do is ride a bike, you know, you can't, you know, you can't do anything else almost. So it's like I wanted to prove it, and I ended up, you know, getting a job, you know, really being responsible, and became like the youngest operations manager for an audiovisual company, you know. And then it's like I just wanted to establish myself as somebody that can do other things, you know. And it wasn't, and I always knew too that this is part of it, is that with the job at the time, I was like, man, you know, I've got to do one or the other, you know, because I was full-time writing. I was not like, you know, like, oh yeah, I took a couple hours, did this. I was just writing. And so once, you know, I was like working, it's like I felt like I didn't want to be, and I remember thinking this for several years, is that I didn't want to be half-assed. I didn't want to come out there and just like, oh, I can still kind of do some of my tricks and have that disappear. I just was like, I'm going to wait till a time, and I'm going to, you know, I'm going to write again, and I'm just going to pour all of my energy into it, and just, you know, come up with new stuff. And, you know, I always loved it and stuff like that. So it's not one of those things where I got bored, burnt out. It was more or less like life just caught up with me, you know. And it was like, you know, I wasn't that, you know, 14, 15-year-old that was like kind of like, you know, I could just be irresponsible. I had to really learn how to be responsible and take care of myself. And, you know, fortunately, it just it worked itself out to where I think it did me some good, because it, you know, it made me appreciate writing even that much more when I started writing again, because, you know, I was just like still had that same passion and love for it as I did when I was younger.
When did you get back into riding? I remember I bumped into you at the X Games, and we were talking about, I said to you, man, Pete Brandt, like, what's going on? And then you were like, man, I'm going to try and get back into it. You had, I think it was I want to say it was a Blue Aries and Steingrab. I know you were asking me because I was using Steingrabber pegs, and you were like, I thought it was 99 maybe. And then
Yeah, it was.
I came back the next year, and you were a monster.
The one thing that it was so crazy, man, is that what got me really into it, and, you know, I'll try to get to the point of this right here, because it could tend to be a long story, but I've told this before, is 99, the X Games came to San Francisco, and, you know, one of the things that I really missed is being able to ride with people like Golden Gate Park. You know, there's like riders, and it's like, as a kid, I knew that there was people there, so I was going to make my way there. And that's kind of the same feeling. I was like, what? There's going to be a bunch of riders in town, the X Games. So, I mean, the X Games, a lot of people are very negative about it, but I think it was something that was positive in the sense that it made me aware that there's other riders out there that were still pushing it. And I just, you know what I ended up doing? I was working for this one company, and I said, hey, I'm going to take off. I got to leave early, and I got my bike. I always had my bike. I never got rid of it, never sold it, never wanted to. And I got my bike, aired up the tires, went down there, and just started riding from right then. And that, what was even crazier is the next day I went to work, and I told, you know, the place that I was working, I said, hey, I'm gonna have to go freelance or whatever. I basically quit my job. And I was like, I just threw it to the wind, and I just said, hey, this is, you know, I love this stuff. And then on top of it, I was like looking at people that were busting, and I was like, I know that feeling of being able to just hit your stuff and come up with new stuff. It's like, there's no other feeling like it. It's like, it's something that money can't buy. So I just didn't give a shit about my job at that time. I just basically went in there and just told them, that's it, you know, basically you guys can hire me for freelance. Like, I'll call you when I'm available. And I didn't have a job for a while. And I had some money saved up, luckily, so I just kind of I got by. I was like living the ultimate like flatland life, basically, like really like watching my money and just, you know, making sure that I could just get by. But you know, the main thing is that I had the time to ride. So I just continued to ride, and you know, just from that day on, it was crazy. I went through probably about 3 years without missing a day, right from that. And so it really sparked something in me. And then on top of it, I realized that I enjoyed it, loved it just as much, and you know, was very passionate about it. Just as a kid, it wasn't one of those things where like, oh man, you know, it used to be fun, and I'm going to talk about the old days. I was like, let's talk about what we're going to do. What's the new stuff? You know, like, you know, I wanted to throw out all the old stuff. You know, I just got the momentum of being able to pull the old stuff, and then instantly I would just wanted more. You know, it's just one of those things that just was like, you know, man, you know, just get as many tricks as you can and just keep flowing and just have fun with it and live it.
Riding for KGB.
Yeah, writing for KGB was awesome. I really liked, you know, their geometry and stuff like that, their innovative ideas. And again, when they would send me stuff, I would try it, and it just got to be a rhythm of every time I put it on. It was like improving my writing, it was keeping it current, and it was also helping me progress. There's just, you know, they had really good ideas in it. You know, the quality, of course, you know, like a lot of people were like, oh, these frames were breaking, but they were examining the possibilities of how far you could push, you know, the products that they made. They were basically getting down to it. So they were really cool dudes, and I respect them, of course, as riders. So it was an honor to ride for those guys, and just to, you know, also help them promote, because it was a good thing at the time, you know, that I really was stoked on.
Like, you live the culture of Flatland, like, in everything you do. What is flatland riding for you, Pete?
It's life, you know, it really is. It changes my perspective as far as my outlook on life, you know. Like, if I didn't have it, honestly, I'd probably look at this world a lot, you know, like I'd just be bummed. You know, luckily it's been a delight, you know, in my life, to where I, you know, even, it's crazy, you know, I've had things happen to me, I've lost loved ones, I've had all kinds of things, but Flatland's always been not only just my identity, you know, of what I have to do to be me, but it's also one of those things where it's just, you know, some people like even think it's almost like taking it too far, but it really shapes my outlook on life. You know, if I'm riding good, I feel good, life is great, you know. It helps me, you know, with my relationships, like even with my sons and stuff like that. Instead of being in a bummed out mood or whatever, I get out there and, you know, throw my tricks and stuff like that. I come back in a good mood, you know, accomplishment and stuff like that for the goals that we set out for. So it's really shapes just everything in life for me. You know, I know some people probably wouldn't feel the same or think like, you know, but it's something that I'm just grateful that I found at a very young age, and it has been there my entire life. So it's like I have respect for it, and also the passion. You know, it's something that, you know, once in a while I'll be riding at the Clocktower and I'll see somebody like in, you know, a wheelchair. I've gotten to know a couple people actually that, you know, are paralyzed and stuff like that, and I'm like, look at, you know, these people like don't have that choice, and I do. So I take advantage of it, and, you know, appreciate it.
One of the biggest things in Flatland that no one talks about is shoes. How specific are you with a Flatland shoe? What do you look for in a Flatland shoe?
Anything but Vans. No, I look for, you know, it's very specific. You want something that's going to be durable. Like I've ridden for a couple companies that make shoes that are pretty flimsy. I mean, the advantage point of that is you don't have to break them in as much, but I kind of have a system as far as like throwing them in the microwave and stuff like that. And then on top of that, you know, I have insoles and stuff, you know, that basically, you know, are made for skating, but I mean, it basically stops me from having a lot of pain for like those long sessions. But primarily, it's like what I found that works best for me is Nike Airflight 89, even though those guys haven't given me anything. And I've been riding them for years, and they've gotten like so much coverage with the shoe. we won't be bitter about that. But yeah, that particular shoe is awesome. I mean, there's a few things that I would redesign with it, and I'd like to actually do something with, but it just seems like a lot of people that get into like, yeah, you know, I'm going to make a Flatland shoe, and then they realize, well, you're not going to make $1 million, and it's not, you know, it's got to be something just for the riders, you know, just basically not, you know, financially going to, you know, make anybody rich. It's going to be something that you can probably maintain to do, but it's not going to make you $1 million. So, you know, there's always been like people that have an interest in making a shoe, but it just doesn't ever seem to really work out. But as far as, yeah, the Nike Air Flight 89, it's perfect in the sense that, you know, it covers a lot of your foot where normally, you know, other shoes, your feet would get sore, and then on top of it, it would just rip apart. You know, I think it was, I think there was some rider from the UK that was telling me about Vans and riding them for like a day, and they didn't work out too well. So, you know, it's just one of those things where it's like a nice durable shoe that's, you know, it's also pretty comfortable in the sense where, you know, you could just ride for hours and not have, you know, like the bruised heel type of syndrome with a lot of other shoes, you know, even if you're running out of tricks and stuff like that, you know, it just kind of works for me.
When did you get into DJing and like the whole hip hop and later on drum and bass? Talk about the early stages first.
Yeah, I was like 14 years old, and actually I was over at Eric's house, and his mom had like a turntable. It was like so old school, man. It's hilarious. It was like cassette deck and a tuner, and then on top of it there's a turntable, you know. So I was making like these mixtapes where I would just like use the turntable, and I would even scratch it in at the time or whatever. You know, I was listening to a lot of hip hop, so yeah, I just kind of was like interested in doing it, and you know, I was like, one day I'm gonna get a turntable. I ended up getting one. Just started scratching to, you know, I'd have a cassette playing, so I was just primarily into scratching and beat breaking and that type of stuff. And then I ended up, you know, saving up, and I bought another turntable. So I had 2 turntables, and I got into juggling and scratching, you know, opposed to mixing. I wasn't really much of a mixer, but of course, you know, you have somebody that won't be like, hey man, you want to play this party? And it's like, you can't scratch for like 3 hours. People will like, they'll fucking run out of there, you know. They'll just basically just be over it. So yeah, so I just basically really got into the trick end of it, like the battling aspect of DJing. And then I heard drum and bass. Well, actually I heard jungle, and I was just turned on to that. I was like, that's awesome. And then I started to go, well, you know, it's cool is actually it's fast enough to where I'm not bored sitting there waiting to mix in a record. It's like you have to move with it. So I just really got fascinated with it because it's like quick. So I would, you know, I basically have 8 measures on one record to mix in, and at this point in time where the break comes in, and I build with 2 records, all of a sudden snap it to that one, grab another one after 4 measures, and you know, just basically started formulating you know, patterns and stuff like that to, you know, make solid mixes. And then what was really cool about it is I would give out like tapes and stuff to people and promoters, and they would listen to them, and they would be like, man, you know, you did this in the studio or whatever, you know. It wasn't necessarily the sound quality, but how fast that the records were being flipped, you know. And what ended up happening is they were like, you know, can you do that live? And I'm like, yeah, that's how I did it. You know, it was just one take. It wasn't like I, you know, went back and corrected. It was like you hit play and record, and you record it, you know, and that's it. So I started getting really, you know, getting booked a lot, you know, quite a bit, to where there was there's just these parties that started getting bigger and bigger.
Oh, Nick.
Hanging out with Cuba.
I didn't hang out with him like every day or anything. I definitely don't want people to get it twisted like, oh, he said his best friend's is Cuba or whatever. But yeah, I met this dude at car show battles, and on top of it, there was also a battle where a good friend of mine, Tomcat, he was a guy that I used to practice with scratching and stuff like that. We later formed a drum and bass like duo basically, and make a long story short, you know, he's always been a really cool dude. You know, he's down to earth. He's definitely not stuck on himself and not egotistical. So he was always one of those dudes where, you know, like I would see him and stuff at random places, and he would say what's up. He remembers me from back in the day when we would just cut it up at different events, or there's also like Q's record store was one of the places that everybody would go to get records. So it just like randomly you see him there and stuff like that. But always a cool dude, and really good friends with a good DJ named Tomcat that was a good friend of mine that I was telling you about. That we formed a duo drum and bass group and project. So yeah, it was one of those things too. It was like, it was so underground back then. It's not like he just stepped on the scene. He really paid his dues using like FM20 and all kinds of underground stuff that people don't even really know about. As far as the history, the DJ culture aspect of it. But there's a lot of guys that were good, and there's like so many different times where we would all be in one place. There's a spot called Deco that was in San Francisco, and I'll never forget it because Q-Bert's not very tall. He's kind of short, and he could fit in there easily because the ceiling was about that tall. So I'd be like in there like, oh, my neck would be all like just hunched to the side scratching, and we'd walk out of that place sore, man, from sessioning and stuff. It was cool. It was like open turntables, people could just get on. And yeah, we spent some time there as well. That was kind of like the weekly deal, that we would just go to all the time and just, kind of bring out the cuts and just, throw different styles.
Introduce your kids.
This is Cadence, this is Skylar, this guy's 9, this guy's 11, and they play a lot of Fortnite. Yo, Nick!
Oh my god, that's the best fucking thing ever.
Awesome. Alright, guys.
Oh yeah, I started in season 3.
Oh, he started season 3, so he's
I
progressing.
started in season 3 too.
Oh my god, you can floss yourself out of here.
Yeah.
I started 2 days after
Keep
we
it
started.
flossing, guys.
So from growing up in the ozone days to modern day, how has your riding routine changed?
Yeah, it's changed with my timeline. Like, in other words, when I was a kid and I was in school, I had to go to school. I couldn't cut school because, it's like one of those things where I would just, I'd get in big trouble. So I didn't mess around like that. I had to stay in school and do that. So I shaped my riding around the day as far as like, what I was allowed, how much time I was allowed to ride. As far as like what's changed to now, like even now it's a little bit different. It's changed over the past couple of years. For a while I was just doing shows and just making just enough money to get by, and then I've gotten since then a job at JP Morgan Chase for a company called ABS. Anyway, so I'm about a block away from the Clocktower, so it's really it's one of those things that was a deciding factor on the job because it wasn't going to cut into my riding. In fact, I ride more now because I'm not like in a truck driving a ramp around and stuff. I'm actually just just a block away, so I just get my work done and go out there and ride. I use my lunchtime to ride as well, so it's like I have like kind of multiple sessions at this point in time. It's not like one of those things where I just have one big block, which is cool, but also at the same time it's good because it gives me a second to kind of stretch, make sure that I'm just conditioned to ride, to where I don't get sore and stuff like that as much, and it's just I hydrate a little bit more because I'm not just like riding straight. I'm like I go handle a few other things, go back to it, but for the most part I have like about 2 sessions a day. One's an hour or 2, and then the other one's about like 4 hours, into basically the night.
How much would you say street culture inspires your riding? So what I mean by that is being at the Clocktower, bums walking past, guys with bagpipes, skateboarders. It's a rad scene. Like there's always fresh people coming past. A lot of people showed you a lot of love there. I noticed from the one day that I've been there, and then people were quite respectful towards Flatland. So
Yeah,
I think it's a big part of what makes Pete Brandt. Tell me about it.
It's really cool. I mean, honestly, like the skaters and stuff like that are super supportive, and you know, I know a lot of other scenes like people don't, you know, skaters don't get along with BMX, but it's interesting because a lot of times I'm actually feeding off even their energy. They're out there busting, and you know, there's a few cats that I ride with, you know, or see, I even consider that they ride. They'll be skating and I'll be riding, and you know, they see that I'm going still and they keep going, and I see them vice versa. And we talk about it later on, like, dude, you're going for like 5 hours, and like, yeah, you know, you were busting out that whole entire time. It's like, yeah, because I saw you, and it just, you know, kind of basically just forms from that. Basically, you know, especially the habit of, you know, somebody coming out every day. You start seeing these guys every day, and it's like really hard not to get to know somebody when they're like, you know, just right next to you the entire day, just about, you know, a lot of times. And especially like on the weekends and stuff like that, it's really hardcore because that's when a lot of people will be able to come out, you know, because they might work Monday through Friday or whatever. But make a long story short, they're really supportive, and everybody's super cool, like, you know, down as far as they look out for each other. You know, we really ultimately have a lot of respect for each other, and, you know, we kind of keep the place and regulate it, you know, to where we don't allow certain things. We definitely don't allow people coming down there stealing stuff and being shady. You know, we just bounce them right out of there. And as far as all the locals and stuff like that, I've gotten just a ton of love where it's been interesting because, you know, I tend to think myself when I'm out there, I just zone out. I'm just, you know, I have my headphones in, and I'm just like basically like almost like to imagine that I'm not even being seen, you know, but it's like, truthfully, I'm being seen every second, you know. It's interesting because there's been a few people that work in the buildings, you know, surrounding the Clocktower, and they're like, hey, I'm on the like 45th floor, and I was watching you. I even have footage and stuff like that, you know, they'll airdrop me or whatever. They're like, yeah, I got this link right here. And it's like I've gotten, you know, it's formed a good relationship with a lot of the people. They've gotten to know me, and, you know, you know, some people are just intrigued. They're just like, what is this guy here every day? What is he doing? You know, like, he must do something with this. You know, they want to know, like, you know, or do you win competitions? Do you do this, that, or whatever? And then all of a sudden they're like, that's the dude I saw at the Warriors halftime show, you know, or whatever. You know, it just kind of, you know, makes it to where it's gotten to be, you know, a thing that people are seeing more and more of. And I like it in this, not only just the spot, the atmosphere and the energy, but I also like the fact that, you know, it's making it to where people don't, less and less people are not saying like, oh, that Flatland, I never see that anymore. You know, people are starting to go like, yeah, you know, I saw Austin Coleman yesterday. He was talking about some guy showed him on his phone. He's like, yeah, check out this guy on this bike, you know, because he found out he rides BMX, and it wasn't like BMX related as far as the, you know, it was something to do with business, you know, outside of BMX, and he just happened to say like, catch wind that Austin rides BMX, and he showed him like footage of me at the Clocktower. So it's cool in the sense that it's promoting it to let people know that it is in fact still alive, of course, and, you know, it's, you're not just something that, you know, young, you know, 15-year-old kids do. It's like anybody can do it, you know.
How does Pete Brandt not appear to age at all? You don't look any different than when we idolised you riding for Ozone.
That's quite a compliment. Thanks for even.
Oh, I just want to know. For the record, how old you are?
48.
Do you work out?
No, I've never been to a gym in my life.
So what do you do?
I ride bikes. I ride BMX Flatland.
Do you have a diet? Anything like that?
No, I do monitor my weight a little bit just because I'm very like conscious, and I know that, you know, as you get older, you know, you might put on some weight, and all of a sudden it's harder to take off. You put on more weight. The next thing you know is you're just like this big bloated dude. And I just, you know, I basically just, you know, as far as my diet goes, like, I wouldn't even really consider it a diet. I pretty much eat one time a day. You know, I might have something like really light early or whatever, like maybe fruit or whatever, something like soup or something. But for the most part, I just eat one time a day, so that's how I kind of regulate my weight. And I definitely, you know, like, that's another thing too. It's like, as weird as it may sound, and how geeked out I am off of Flatland, it's like I worry about gaining weight because I'm like, I don't want to start breaking more axles and stuff like that.
Tricks invented.
Oh man, jump switches, like, in other words, when you see old school like Real TV 2 or Real TV 1 even, where I actually jump and switch my feet and scuff with a left and the right. That's like something that, you know, you can do the research and see it. I was the first one to do that because what would happen back in the day is somebody would do a switch pitch on the other side, use the right foot, and then do a dump truck on the other side using the right foot. I was just like, okay, I'll just use my left foot, and I just kind of trained my brain to think, you know, like in an ambidextrous way, you know, to where it's like, oh, well, just, you know, use your foot the same way on the other side as if, you know, you're just imagining you're using the other foot. It just worked for me, you know, as far as that thought process. So that's one of the bigger ones because that opened up cross-footed lard yards, dump truck, switch pitches, all kind of, even Circle K, you know, that was like a thing that I came up with, you know, scuffing on the opposite side. A lot of it has to do with Jesse because he rode on the opposite side of the bike. So normally, you know, where somebody would be scuffing with their right foot, he scuffed actually naturally with his left. So that was like a big thing for me because when I would ride with him, I'd be like, oh, well, he's doing on that side, so I could do that and I can add that to this. You know, we were feeding off each other and just discussing it and just kind of putting ideas together. So it just kind of opened up doors for me. Crack Packer is another one. Street Sweeper, which is an inside scuffing trick, like it's a dump truck underneath with the tire here and your foot's actually on this peg and you're scuffing inward. That was like one of the first, you know, I'm sure somebody else probably thought of the concept or maybe even came up with, you know, their own plan of that. But as far as for me, I came up with that. And there's all kinds of things. It's interesting because, I mean, there's also like different ways that I got into tricks, you know. And it was because I would see a magazine and somebody would just be in that position. You know, like for an example, a death truck, somebody, you know, they would weave the bars, but all I was seeing is in the magazine is somebody in that position. So I just naturally thought, oh, you just throw your leg over. So I just threw my leg over to get into a death truck, not thinking like I was doing it as something original. You know, I was just like, I thought that was how you did it. And I just, you know, it's funny because I saw Kevin Jones years later in a town called Tracy. He's doing a 2-hip show for Wilkerson Airlines, and he ended up doing a death truck across the parking lot, and I just felt like a dumbass. I was like, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. And then he came up to me and he was like, man, you're like the new generation. You just throw your leg over to a death truck, and you're doing this, those cliffhangers like from a hitchhiker, and it just took off from there. Like I was, you know, I was actually like feeling like I was doing it the wrong way, but in fact I was just doing it my way, what made sense to me, and it just kind of, you know, just rolled on from there. I just like kind of had a way of like kind of trimming the excess and, you know, just throwing myself into tricks, you know, which still, you know, to this day I really enjoy. I like just getting in the moment.
Riding for wee bicycles.
It's rad. It's really something I'm stoked on. Dylan's not only just one of the sickest riders, but he's also, man, I don't know what it is. He's got that magic touch because, and you know, a lot of people always want to say, oh, my bike's, you know, so dope or better or whatever, but honestly, he makes such good quality. For an example, there's Ruben Castillo's been riding a frame that he made him like, I don't know, like 5 years ago or something ridiculous like that. Whoever heard of a frame lasting that long? It's just amazing. But I swear by it and I stand by it because it's like, you know, of course, ride your own, but not only just ride your own, but like a really good rider. So he gets the concept and he knows, you know, how to make these frames. And, you know, he's coming out with bar ends and all that type of stuff. He's got bars. And it's one of those things. It's kind of like KGB when I rode for those guys. You know, they would, you know, send me some stuff. And I, you know, at the very beginning, I'm like, I don't know if that's, you know, these pegs are a little bit different or whatever. And I would put them on and it would just improve my riding. And that's something that Dylan's managed to do as well. You know, to currently, you know, he's making stuff that's just, you know, it's awesome. It's, you know, even if I was to be approached by some company that makes like, you know, or wanted to give me a contract for a lot of money, I would still choose to ride for Wii because it's like, you know, I just feel it's the best stuff. And it's like when you ride something like that, you don't want to go back. You know, it'd be like going to like a bike that weighs 35 pounds versus like, you know, 20 pounds, 17 pounds.
What is your beer of choice?
I'm going to say Blue Moon. It changes from time to time, but usually something that's light that doesn't leave me hungover is definitely going to do it for me. So that's kind of my go-to right now.
How do you get so dialed?
Oh man, thanks for the compliment. But I just ride a lot, and I just really like to, I guess, take it seriously. You know, I'm kind of that. Well, not kind of. But I am that rider that doesn't want to put anything off. Like, you know, maybe I'll hit it tomorrow night. But I really just like to put like the energy into it. You know, that's why it's kind of important for me to, you know, go out and just get going. You know, not lag on it, because I find I get, you know, I have better sessions when I really just focus, of course. And then getting back to the question, of course, is just riding a lot mainly, and you know, just keeping my bike dialed. It has a lot to do with it, I believe.
Talk about riding in shows and your approach to show riding.
Well, you know, it's interesting because when I first started to do shows, I was offered to do the show in Santa Clara, and it was for Ozone, and I only rode contests before that, so I come from just a strictly contest background. So doing the shows, that was something that I was kind of like reluctant. I didn't want to do it. I thought people wouldn't understand it, because at the time, this is pre-X Games, this is before there was any sort of exposure whatsoever, so people just were like, what's this guy doing, you know? And I was like, I think I was like 16 years old, and people thought like, you know, already you're too old to ride a bike at 16 to be doing flatland. So yeah, my take on shows now is I really like doing it because I think definitely not for the money. I actually have a day job where I get paid, in fact, more money, you know, but I do like not only the appreciation that people, you know, kind of seem to get. A lot of people have came up and said, you know, especially young kids, where they're like, oh man, I want to find something to do like that, or, you know, I wish I could do that. And I always try to encourage them, you know, you could do it, or you could, you know, you could achieve anything if you put your mind to it, and, you know, your focus and energy, and don't let anything take that away. So it gives me an opportunity to kind of, you know, communicate with people in a good way, and then also at the same time, you know, kind of put Flatland on the map to let people know, you know, the older generations, it's kind of like, we're still here, we're still progressing, and the younger ones, we're here and you haven't seen it, this is what it's about.
Tell me about juggling the family life. 2 kids, wife. How do you fit in time to ride? And maybe a little bit about your little power sessions in here. I noticed you ride like 20 minutes, boom, back in, boom, out again. Pretty interesting. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a necessity, you know, because as you got to experience it, you know, sometimes it rains here, and when it does, I don't want to just, you know, go, oh man, I want to ride today. And then also there's the hassle of going to like an underground parking garage where you just get kicked out doing the first trick, or you don't just start pulling your bike out. There's the security that just comes rolling up on you. It happens in a lot of places. And also there's the element of cars driving through that also they start trapping water. It's just, there's a lot to it that could actually basically just delay your riding. So I found a spot, this house right here had a pretty decent garage. A lot of people think it's too small, but I think it's good training grounds, because it forced me to be able to learn things in a kind of semi-difficult spot. And then also a lot of development goes into my riding here, because, you know, I think of something, you know, for example, I'll be in the house and all of a sudden something pops in, or I just have the urge or something, you know, or maybe I might have a trick that I was doing that day and I come out and I want to dial it, so I come out and start riding a little bit more just to hit it, just because, you know, you're just stoked on the feeling of accomplishment. So I kind of use it for many reasons, of course, and the main reason is to just train and ride and be able to escape the rain.
Talk about your relationship with skateboarders at the Clocktower. I thought that was pretty rad, the way you interact, and not only that, but you look out for each other. And like the fakey Bigfoot guy was like, you're riding, the guy gets in the way, the wheelie kids, and he's like, hey man, takes them to one side. He even took skateboarders aside. So there's something like really interesting going on there, like subculture of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I love those guys. Honestly, it's one of those relationships that started out where they were skating at Pier 7. I was riding at a different spot, but I migrated over to the Clocktower, and all of a sudden Pier 7 shut down. They started filtering over, and at first there was like a little bit of like tension because there was way more of them than me. but they knew I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't going to leave the spot, and they started to have respect, and I had the mutual respect because I was like, wow, these guys are putting in time. They're out here just as much as me. They're out here every day. It was very natural for us to vibe and, you know, appreciate each other's skill and even motivate each other. It's crazy because I get the same feeling as when I'm with somebody that's riding Flatland or just killing it on really anything in that sense of BMX, but it's skateboarding, and I see the progression. I see the frustration too, you know, where somebody's mad, but instead of just giving up or just not having it in them, they stick it out and they're out there, and, you know, we get to see, you know, each other just accomplish these goals that we set for ourselves, and it's motivating because you're like, you know, at the same time, I'll be working on something and I don't want to give up, you know, on it, and it's just something that just kind of reassures me that there's other people out there pushing, so it's like I got to keep pushing too, you know, so it's definitely a thing that we feed off each other.
So this is how Pete does it.
That's how we have to do
So we've got a wet floor, and he's making it happen. Leaf blower, squeegee, brush.
Got a broom here.
One of the most interesting things I saw was the lamp post at the clock tower. Tell me about the lamp post and how that works and what you did with the lamp post in order to make it work for what you want to do at clock tower.
It's interesting because I was riding by it, and I've been riding there already for like a year or two, and I saw kind of like a glimpse of light coming through, and then on top of it, it's noticeable if you look at it. You can see the edges to where, you know, you could, you know, figure out that it's a door, and I saw hinges at the top too. But it's really stealth. It's not something that anybody would pick up on unless they're spending a lot of time there. And so what I did is originally I ended up buying a broom because of the glass and stuff like that that's around, you know, to clean the spot. And I put the broom in there. Then all of a sudden I found, I went to Home Depot, and, you know, it's like a hardware store type place out here in America. And I found a leaf blower that was, I measured it out to make sure that I could fit in there and I could come apart. So basically I found the one that's compatible for that spot. And then shortly after that, that's when I started to realize there's a power drop. There's like an L14 connector, which is like 220. So I basically cut it in half on a power strip, just you know, took the hot and the lead and then basically stepped it down to 110. So, you know, you can put a power strip in there. It's been quite, you know, handy for everybody that wants to like charge their phone to film, and, you know, want to charge their cameras, and also the leaf blower battery. So it's one of those things where it just kind of started to serve a purpose in a lot of ways. So now there's like all kinds of stuff in there, and, you know, like I have a pool squeegee in there, you know, we have you know, just everything, you know, basically the necessities for keeping the spot clean. And, you know, in case, you know, there's a lot of times I'll come out there and there'll be glass everywhere, and you know, that way it's not just like, oh, I'm just gonna get a flat tire and have to sit there and pick it up. It's like I don't want to spend the time, lose the time riding, and I want to spend the time, you know, just maintaining the spot as efficiently as possible. So that's how that comes into play.
If you had to pick a favorite era of your riding, what would it be, and why?
I don't know, I would almost say now, you know, because it's like, just because the accumulation of friends and, you know, kind of family that, you know, it's just grew over the years. You know, I've got to know a lot of people, and it just means a lot to me, you know, especially the guys that I've known for years, you know, and we've just had this connection, and on top of it, we share the same passion. So it's something that today's standards, I've actually appreciated even more, because a long time ago back in the day, there wasn't anybody around, and people were disappearing, they were quitting. You know, there's like, you know, a lot of negativity, you know, people saying, you know, it was a waste of time and never got paid and stuff like that. Or, you know, they had bad experiences with, like, you know, even ozone or something like that just didn't work out. So I feel now it's just self-reliant on the progression of Flatland, and that's the main thing. You know, I don't have any sort of regrets about the past, but I do feel that, you know, now it's just, there's just so many people I basically spent a lifetime of riding with, you know, and they're still around, and it's just, it's a beautiful thing, you know, to be able to just go, wow, man, we've basically spent our lives together with this, you know, and shared that passion. So, yeah, I'd say pretty much now is my favorite time of Flatland.
About your solo DVD project with Matt Gardner.
It sucked, mate.
Oh my god.
It was really a project that there's so much to it. You know, it's hard to just break it down, but I'll do my best. It started out where we just wanted to make, you know, a video, and it became this like monster of a video. I'll never forget, and I remember telling you the story about Matt Gardner. You know, he came up with, like, he had different music and stuff like that, and a different, you know, because I basically just wanted him to edit it because he has, you know, really good editing skills. But I kind of had a vision of what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be kind of drum and bass based, and then on top of that, I just wanted it to be kind of something new that hadn't been done, in the sense of just, you know, the Easter eggs. You know, for an example, you could go to a certain chapter and you hit enter, and it'll take you to a bunch of hidden scenes and stuff like that. And also it'll take you to kind of a little bit of lifestyle type stuff, and then even an interview and some scratching and that kind of thing. So it's just kind of a bonus. In fact, the Easter eggs accumulate the same amount of time as the actual runtime on the DVD itself. So that was one of the things that, you know, started out, we were just going to do like kind of a basic video, and then it just, you know, Matt's first draft, it was cool, but it wasn't what what I wanted and what my, you know, my vision was. You know, it's kind of, I almost feel bad in a certain sense, because when he showed me the first rough draft, I was just like, oh no, we can't have this, you know, like, no way, couldn't be further from what I, you know. And, you know, we basically kind of made almost like if you were to make a storyboard for like a motion picture, you know, that's how the timeline, you know, in the very beginning, it starts going, all the years, it starts going up, it shows the different tricks. That's something that I thought that would be cool. And then on top of that, there's like the building of the backyard, we covered that. Matt came up with the concept of the time lapse for that, building a backyard and, you know, showing all the work and then the ending result. You know, so he had his input on it as well, definitely, you know, and I had mine. It's just, you know, we kind of shaped it as we went around, and the more that we came up with the things that we wanted to put in it, of course, along with that came more work, you know, and it really became, you know, not just on the writing, like filming and stuff like that. It was also just the editing that Matt had to put together, you know, for it. It took a long time, you know, to develop, and then the end result, you know, we knew it was done. It wasn't like, oh, well, yeah, it's close enough. It was like, okay, that's it, we're done. And all our ideas that we thought of came to life in it.
That's rad. So, what about back in the day, writing to Above the Law murder rap? What's the story with that track?
I liked it because the hypnotical type of beat that it has, it was like something that was kind of like, I would write to Public Enemy, you know, before that, and I just liked the fact that, like, sirens going off and it's just like, you know, it's on, you know, kind of feeling. It was something that instantly when you hear it, like if you hear that track to this day, you're just gonna go, that's that track, you know. And I wanted that kind of feeling for my runs. I wanted to be like, okay, that dude's on, you know. That was basically my style of competition writing, you know.
So, got to ask you, the Flat Matters GoFundMe page to get me out here, it all came from you, so tell me about why you wanted to get me out here.
Oh man, well, the bottom line to it is that I appreciate so much what you do and what you've done for the sport, and didn't ask for anything in return. I felt it was our duty as riders to show the appreciation, not only show the appreciation but the respect. And you know, I did come up with the idea to do it, but I mean everybody really played part in it, you know, that gave into this fund. And you know, some people will say like, oh, you know, it's supposed to be for medical, you know, things like that. But I mean, if you look at GoFundMe, it's also for rewards. And you know, I wanted to reward you like you've rewarded us with, you know, blessing us with all this, you know, content and stuff, taking the time to do it. And you know, anybody that can actually see what's really happening knows that that site is not ran by sponsors. And isn't like a paid-for site, and you know, it's not like when you go to watch a video every time some ad pops up and all of a sudden you start getting spam and stuff like that. It's really just ran for the content and the purpose of the riders. So I felt like it was something that we could do to give back. And on top of it, you know, I'm so grateful that you made it out, man. I know you have your thing going on back home, and you took the time to come out here. But I thought, you know, I wanted to share kind of, you know, what Cali is like, you know, and also get you away a little bit for the winter and hopefully motivate you, you know, just as you motivated us with all the content. So much respect, man. And, you know, seriously, I had the time of my life, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, it's been amazing, Pete. Thank you so much. Can you tell me about your signature frame with Wii Bicycles? I know you're a specific guy, so I imagine there's a lot of detail that goes into your frame that perhaps the average person that rides Flatland does not consider. So, can you tell me from top to bottom about your frame and why do you have your bars back, etc., etc.?
Oh, as far as just like my general setup?
You talk about the frame and then the other bits.
Oh, and then the other bits. Okay, yeah. The frame itself, Dylan really made something that was just incredible. To this day, the first frame that he made, the version 1, the equation actually, Aaron Frost is riding right now, and it never broke. I mean, that's unheard of. You know, I've honestly had so many frames break within 6 months and been like, oh, that one lasted pretty long. And we're talking that frame's probably, Aaron's been riding for like about 2 years now. So, and then I rode it for about almost 2 years. So we're talking like 4 years on a frame that's ridden like quite often. So, that's just basically about the quality of it. As far as the design, there's several different things like the chain tensioner on the inside. You know, it's kind of one of the first frames that ever had that, as well as super low profile dropouts. There's not a whole lot of room to move it back or forward. There's just enough to basically keep it to where your wheel is slammed, which is how I like it, because you know, you don't want to really slow it down, and on top of it at the back of the dropout, pegs get loose, so it's really just dialed in. The other thing about it, of course, is the head tube. It's actually an oversized head tube, so it kind of pushes your forks down so you have clearance, so you don't have to have like a bent down tube, but you have just as much clearance as a frame that does have a bent down tube. And then the butted seat tube as well, so it's reinforced at the top, strong, it doesn't break in that area. Yeah, there's just all kinds of things. A Spanish bottom bracket, I found I liked to use the Spanish bottom bracket a lot more. I'm not so much into a guy that likes his cranks to spin around, so I don't really need a mid bottom bracket, as well as you know, the weight, you know, differences, you know, tremendous. I like that, you know, and yeah, pretty much that's it, other than of course the bracing is made perfectly for a tire like an Aries tire, whether it's a 190 or a 175, you can slam it up there and it basically has that room to push that wheel all the way up comfortably.
Right, last question. Pete, what do you do for a 9-to-5 job?
I work for JP Morgan Chase corporate offices, regional technical specialist. I do a lot of VC calls, video conferencing, bridge calls, connections, and pushing content. It's a little bit more specific than what I used to do. I used to do a lot of sound reinforcement with like DLP projectors as well, and you know, fast fold screens. And if anybody knows about that stuff, it's just basically like moving a house every day. But this job is really close to the Clocktower, and it's just a good match for me. And on top of it, honestly, I don't think I've ever really broken a sweat there. It's just more of using your mind, so it's good for me to, you know, save my energy for riding as far as the physical aspects of it. So yeah, it's just something that kind of came along, that I was doing freelance in between shows for years, and then the company ABS actually came to recruit me, and you know, just made me an offer that I was pretty stoked on. Once again, it's close to the Clocktower, so that had a huge factor into it. So that's what I do.
Right, we're getting down, really are getting down to final questions, I promise you. Any final shout outs that you want to give?
Oh man, pretty much everyone. I've done a few interviews before, and it's like I thought about it, and it's like, oh man, I don't want to diss anybody, but the people that have been there for me, and on top of it, the people that really have put the time in, to just developing, what Flatland is today, and just contributing any and everything, it's really something that's special to me, and it means the world to me. So it's like I just appreciate everything that people have done for me, as well as the sport and the art, and I'd like to thank everyone for that.
Brilliant. So I was just bullshitting, by the way.